Welcome to the Change Book Podcast. My name is Rachel Best, and this is our co-host.
I'm Nicole Harvick.
And this is the Change Book series. It is the fastest growing self-empowerment book series on the planet.
This spans over 30 countries, and we now bring them all together in a powerful podcast destined to change people from all corners of the globe.
So go ahead and grab your pen and paper because our guest today is going to share a lot of amazing tips and inspiration that you're definitely going to want to write down.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Harvick, and I am your host today for the Change Book Podcast. And as always, we have an amazing guest, a co-author with us today, and her name is Angeline. I think I pronounced that wrong, Angeline. We'll get to Constantinou. So go ahead and correct me on how I pronounce that.
You did. Listen, Angeline Constantinou, you did great.
Okay, perfect.
I like it.
Okay, we'll go with that. We're going to be easy today and go with the flow, right?
I go with the flow, right?
Yeah, and our guest today is someone who empowers women who have suffered through domestic violence. And I know that's really close to a lot of people's hearts. And she helps them step into their purpose and their calling. And I know that's a huge job and can come with maybe some heartbreak or loss. So would you tell us how you got started in something so noble?
Absolutely. You know, I've always had a passion for helping women break the silence because once upon a time, I was married to I thought who was going to be the love of my life. And he was a high-powered businessman in New York City and earning six-figure income. And, you know, people thought that we were, from the outside, you know how it is. It's like they thought that we were living like the Hollywood couple life, but that wasn't the case behind the scenes. So, I was silenced for way too long. I suffered financial abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, all kinds of abuse. And I felt ashamed to share my story for the first time. I felt ashamed to share my story. So, but I finally, in May of 2010, an epiphany happened. And I woke up one morning and I decided I am going to file for divorce. I had already talked to an attorney, and I decided to write out a check for $5,000 to the attorney to start divorce proceedings because my life was so unbearable. And I just was silenced. He was dominating. But, that financial abuse, I was denied access to monies. Physical abuse, I was thrown against the wall. And this happened in December of 1999. I fell backwards, and fortunately, it was just a broken nose and nothing else.
Wow.
After that, but it was I was in so much pain that 3 days later I had reconstructive nose surgery. Yeah, it was scary. It was scary, and the abuse.
Did he hit you or push you, or how did that?
He grabbed me behind the neck.
Oh.
I was lying in bed. I was crying because he was just being verbally abusive. And I just said, I'm just going to walk into the other room because we had a 4-bedroom house. We lived in a 4-bedroom house. So I said, I'm just going to go into the other room and, sleep on the guest bed. Nope, I didn't make it. He grabbed me behind the neck, threw me against the wall, and I fell backwards. And right here, I felt it. I said, uh-oh. Yeah, my face was bruised. I was bruised all over. And he took me to the emergency room because that's what they do.
So would you say that he was a narcissist?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Controlling, manipulative. And he, and unfortunately, I stayed in that marriage for another 9 years. And so shortly after that, he decided to retire from his business. So I said, I'm going to go out and work in corporate America because I felt called to do that at first. and I wanted to network with other business people and just, be out and not be in the house all the time. Um, so that was going well until I got let go from the last corporate job. And then, the abuse was happening again because we were together too much. And the verbal abuse happened, not the physical, but the verbal abuse happened. And then he started to deny me access to monies, to our bank accounts. And, that took its toll emotionally. I remember one day driving to the bank, not knowing that he withdrew all the money. So I drove to the bank, I was going to get some money so I could go out, and that didn't happen. I only had like $20 in my purse.
Oh,
I was literally broke. I was
yeah,
broken.
that
And
broken is a good word, like inside, right?
yes, yes, broken inside, but I was able to pick myself back up. So I got some help from family members, and I made a decision to seek an attorney. So the attorney was out of Poughkeepsie, New York, high-powered attorney, the best in the county. I was referred by a good friend of mine because I said, I just can't go on like this anymore. I just can't go on like this. So, make a long story short, I drove to the office and I filed for divorce. And I also filed an order of protection
Oh,
against him.
wow.
And after that, I drove to Long Island to spend a week and a half with my family. So, with my cousins. So this way, I could be away from him because it was just becoming unbearable. But I found the strength. It's like, I woke up and an epiphany happened, and I had to take ownership. I took ownership. I surrendered my pride and ego, drew a line in the sand, and I said, I'm going to go to the office and file for divorce. And that's exactly what I did. And I wrote out my last check for $5,000.
Wow. And
Yeah.
when you're in, and I had the same thing. I never had the physical abuse, but it's so interesting how you can start a marriage very sure of yourself. You've worked, you've made money, you've lived by yourself, you've been very independent, and all of a sudden these little things start happening very covertly at first, at least in my situation. But a lot of people think that domestic violence is just physical. But for me, it was more, were the words that were used against me. And it just, every single time I would feel lower and lower and lower. And because I had children, I had two girls watching. In my mind, I was thinking, instead of leaving right away, I was thinking, well, just, don't say anything. We lose our voice. Just don't say anything. He'll stay calm. The family will be calm, not realizing that was just empowering him more, disempowering me, and my girls were watching. So how was yours? Yours seems to be all of the above. Mine was with money too, because I was told, here's your allowance. So that was very demeaning. And
That was
also,
demeaning for me too. Like,
yeah.
I had to go to him and ask for money, and that was demeaning to me. That was
Hmm.
very, demeaning. Because I was the one, when I worked in this business, I was the one who brought in the money in the first place.
Yeah, it's really, did you
Mm,
have children in your relationship?
no.
Okay. Okay. And for me, it was a process, but by the time we were done, and I don't know if you were this way, but you feel a lot, you feel less, you feel like less, and the spark goes out of your eyes, and you don't feel good about yourself. Did you have any of those emotions?
I did, yes, I did. I did. I felt that way, during my travails. I felt anxious, I felt depressed, I felt broken. But when that epiphany happened, then I started to feel hope again, and taking taking my power back. So, taking control of the situation. I had gone for therapy too, and through therapy, I realized that I needed to do what's right for myself. to do what's right for me, start to love on me again. Instead of being so concerned about what he was doing, start to focus on myself. So, and I didn't quite understand that at first because for me, it was a mindset shift.
Yes, that
What
makes sense.
happened was, what happened was that I would go to the library and I would, read books. I educated myself on domestic violence, and I also became involved in the online space. And this is back in 2010. And I started a Facebook account, didn't have many friends, but I said, I'm going to do this. I said, I feel empowered now that I can live on my own. I was going out by myself. I would, go to coffee shops. I would go out to dinner, go spend some time with friends. So I was basically living like a gypsy for 1 year. So while I had a limited protective order, I had a plan in place and I was still staying at the house, but upstairs, but it was on a very limited basis. So I found the way, and through therapy and through my research, I gained a lot more clarity and confidence in myself.
Oh, and that's so important. I don't think a lot of people understand how, when you're in that situation, just those things you're talking about, like going out to coffee, going to a movie, doing something by yourself, that takes so much courage. It's a strange thing. It sounds very easy, but it's not always. And it's almost like you have to step over that fear. Did you find that in your life too, that once you did it, everything became easier?
It did, yes. It became easier and easier. I remember when I used to live in Rhinebeck, I would go to the Beekman Arms Hotel. So I had dinner there one night and I was by myself and I was treated very well. Um, and wine. And so I called up a friend of mine who lives in Norfolk, Virginia. So it was a mutual friend, but she knew what my situation was. So I told her where I was. I said, I'm at the restaurant right now having dinner all by myself. She said, that's okay. She said, dining alone can be very tranquil. And she was right. That set me into a whole nother, whole nother planet. I felt good about myself. I started to feel more confident about myself, that I could go out by myself, because believe it or not, a lot of women are afraid to go out by themselves, and they're afraid to love on themselves because they've been conditioned to take care of the spouse or
Yes.
significant other. Especially like for myself, I grew up in a Greek family. So we were, like the male was dominant, and I was able to break through those generational curses.
Oh,
So
so
yeah,
important.
it was just so important. I mean, it was, it was, boy, that was another, journey alone. I could probably write a book on that, but,
And maybe you should.
and maybe I should, I'm going to, but I feel blessed because I felt empowered to start a podcast. So my podcast, I started actually 4 years ago, right before COVID hit, not knowing that COVID was going to happen.
Oh, wow.
But I knew that I had a vision and a dream that women have a voice, and women, it's up to us to amplify our voices and share our stories with the world. Because I hired a mentor. I invested, I think, $3,000 in a mentor, and that was 4 years ago. And he taught me how to break through my self-limiting beliefs, because I had a lot of self-limiting beliefs that were holding me back for way too long.
Wow. Was
Yeah.
there a pivotal moment when you realized you got your voice back and you realized you love yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That pivotal moment happened, first of all, when I wrote out the check for $5,000.
Mhm.
That was a pivotal moment. And also using my voice and empowering other women, because there's a lot of survivors of domestic violence who still don't feel comfortable amplifying their voice. They're afraid. Some of them may be stuck they feel stuck, but they're not stuck. There's a way to get out. And I know for myself, I had to make a plan. I made a plan, and I didn't tell my ex that I was filing for divorce because I was told not to do that by the
Oh,
authorities. So yeah, so I went to we went to court, and I know I was uncomfortable with it, but my lawyer said, just you're going to be fine. So when he was served with the papers, then he knew that I was filing for divorce. And then I made a plan that I was going to travel to Saratoga Springs for the weekend because at that time the court was in Poughkeepsie, New York, and that's, I lived in that vicinity, in that county. So I made a plan to come up here for the weekend for the first time, and that was 14 and a half years ago.
wow.
Yeah, I stayed with a friend for the weekend, and we went out, and then I knew I wanted to move up here. Then I just said, I'm just going to make a plan and move, because I just felt so much better. You know how it is, like you feel like 50,000 pounds of weight
Oh,
is lifted off your shoulders
yes,
just in
yes,
one weekend.
yes, I do. I remember it well when I finally made that pivotal move to divorce. Because I was scared too. And so I'm wondering, do you work with just women who are already divorced, or do you work with women who are trying to make their plan, or
I
both?
work with women, both actually. Yes, I work with both because I, for me, making a plan was very important. And with divorced women, it's important. And, women who have suffered from domestic violence, it's important that they have a plan in place. And, um, and there's resources available for them to tap
Oh, okay.
into. There's resources for them. And and also, with the podcast, I decided to bring on women. There were women who came forward to share their real life stories,
That's brave.
which is a lot of courage. And a lot of them now are coaches, they're consultants, or they're authors now. Um, and it still takes courage to share your story, because it's not easy being vulnerable. That vulnerability in sharing your story, and this is what happened in 2018 of March. I decided to go live on Facebook and share my entire story. So
Oh,
when I shared my entire story, the video, the live went viral, and it went to 7 million views the next day. I was like, how did this happen? And I was coached, because I was afraid to share my story in public. But then my mentor at that time said, you must share your story, bringing out that vulnerability. And if your camera's shaking, who cares? My camera was shaking. I wasn't smiling. Um, but once I shared my story, then I could see that breakthroughs were starting to happen. And then I made that decision in 2020 to start my podcast, because I was still,
wow.
going through some stuff. I was working full time for an ad agency, and but I became empowered to start a podcast, and then my coaching business as well.
Wow. And I think vulnerability is almost a superpower.
It
We're
is.
we're taught our whole lives to, you know, have that armor on. Don't let anybody see you. Don't cry. Don't do this. And when I started speaking like my real truth,
Mhm.
first of all, it releases all that old junk that you've been storing in your body when you can finally talk about it. And I encourage anyone out there to be vulnerable. And I think you probably feel the same way, don't you?
Oh, I do. Absolutely. 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 I felt vulnerable, but then I felt better after I shared my story.
Yeah, and you got a million views. That's incredible. You
Yeah.
know? And that just speaks to the need for people like you, in my opinion. And one of the things I've always wondered is you hear when a woman goes to make a police report that something's going to happen to her husband's been threatening her. Is that true that the police can't do anything until you're actually hurt?
Yes, unfortunately, that's true. Yeah. I mean, the police helped me in a few ways. So first of all, I changed my cell number, and I changed my phone carrier, because he would look at my cell phone bills, and they were mostly business calls anyways. But they gave me advice, and they said, change your phone number. Change your
Wow.
phone number. Um, I had called the police several times because he was spitting at me, and I was actually told to leave the house that night.
That's so vile. That's like that's even worse than words, I think, for me, that they
Oh, it
would.
is. It was really, really bad. And I had the phone. I always had the phone with me because my family or my first cousin would say, have your phone with you at all times. So I keep my phone is with me all the time. So I just had the phone in my hands and I called 911. And
Wow.
this was at night. So the problems, like during the day, nothing too much happened with me. But at night, that's when the problems started. That's when he started to flare up, was in the evenings. And, he went for therapy, but then he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And that didn't help me at all. I was like, oh
No,
no,
no.
and I just had to find a way out. And, so when I remember leaving that night, I went to a hotel. And, I just had enough money for like one night. So I said, I'm just going to go stay for the
Do
night.
it. Just do it. And was there a particular trigger for him that would set him off, or was it just kind of random based on
It was
what
random.
random? So
Random.
you can't prepare for random.
No, you can't. You can't
Yeah.
prepare for random. But when I saw him flare up and started spitting at me, I
Oh,
said, but they didn't arrest him. They didn't arrest him. But guess what happened? Like there was one, I remember when I had called the police that there was one time this happened during the day. Again, flaring up, acting up. It was all verbal abuse, like cursing at me, calling me the you know what and everything. So the police, the New York State police came and the arrest vehicle was there. You should have seen what the house looked like.
oh man.
Mobbed with sheriffs. And I told them that I feared for my life. So, well, they said, then you'll probably have to go to a friend's house for a few days. There
Wow.
was no grounds for them to arrest him. So I was the one who had to leave. And actually, when I look back on it, it was probably a good thing for me to leave. So I had a couple very good friend of mine. They lived across the river and they actually let me stay for 3 days. And I felt better. And then when I went back home, then it would be like calm. And then the same thing would happen over and over every week, every week, every
Wow.
week. And it was a mental illness. He had a mental illness. And I said, I'm not staying in this marriage. And this is when I had filed for divorce and all that. So, the police did come, the police, for the most part, they were supportive. And when I would, go away and stay with a friend, or when I would come up here because I was apartment hunting, I would let them know. I would tell them I am going to Saratoga for the weekend to look for an apartment. So I started that process 2 months before the divorce became final. And
Someone could know where you were.
right, so someone knew where I was, and a close family member knew where I was because I had my own car. So, that was a positive. So
Yeah,
I had my own
absolutely.
car. So,
And I
um,
hate to say it, but when you've been through this does make you a much better coach. Having
yeah,
literally seen almost probably every side of a person, from physical to mental to spitting. Not that it's a great thing to go through, it's not, but don't you feel that your knowledge is so much different now when you meet a client or you're talking to someone?
oh yeah, oh yes, absolutely. I mean, the wealth of knowledge that I've had, and I still research. Because a lot of new things, new laws have come out, but it feels good to empower a woman because I know I've been in their shoes, and that is not easy. I've been in their shoes, and I know what it's like to feel depressed, overwhelmed. They feel overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. Half the time they're not in their right. Their minds are racing. They're in that flight or fight response,
Yes.
and it's up to me to like calm them down, and then like repeat. So what's going on here? What's happening
Mhm.
here? And then I give them the tools in my coaching program to go from depressed, overwhelmed, to feeling healed, feeling all that empowerment, and that they can stand up for themselves and stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah,
So
that's so good. And what's like what is when the first encounter, what's the first thing you need to say to somebody that's been in that situation like that? I know for me, when it first happened, I felt guilty. I felt guilty that we were going to get a divorce, even though I caught him cheating, so what do you see in a person, and what do you tell them for their first step to get them in a like a mindset of, this isn't okay, this happening to me is
right.
not okay?
It's important to recognize it and take ownership. And this is not okay. But at the same time, to stop playing the victim. And that's what I did. I stopped playing the victim and I took ownership. And when you do that, then you start to move into a state of victor. Because I was the victim. I did play the victim. And, I lost a lot of self-confidence in myself. I had no self-confidence whatsoever. But, I work with them. I work with them on peeling off the layers. So what does this situation look like right now? And how can we help you? How can I help you move into empowerment? And not only that, just happiness. Just
Yes.
happy again.
Yes. And we are layers. I've done so much work on myself, but
Too.
about 2 weeks ago, I was triggered with something I didn't even know was in there.
Wow.
And it was like an epiphany. I'm like, oh my gosh, where was that buried? Because that was awful deep. And so when you say layers, it's just like peeling back an onion. Your subconscious contains so much, and you don't even know it's there often. So what would be like, what if someone's watching this and they're resonating with what you're talking about? What would be the advice you give them to look at themselves and see if this is something that isn't working for them?
The advice that I would give them is, if it's not working for them, it is time to take action. And it's time to make a plan. Recognize it, know that the situation is there. And I know for myself, I felt ashamed at first to even file for divorce, but I called my parents and I was crying. I said, I'm filing for divorce, but it was like a toxic grief for me. So I would say for them, there's light at the end of the tunnel. You're going through the pain right now. You're going through this storm right now. God is going to bring you through the storm. God will bring you through it. And these storms in life are, for us to move into a new season. So you may not feel that at first, but I can tell you it's coming. It's coming. That blessing is coming your way, and you will be free. Because I want you, claim victory. That, what I say, just claim victory. Claim victory. It's a huge mindset shift, but instead of going, because at some point you're going to have to go from scarcity mindset to a growth mindset and move into empowerment and personal growth, because you would be surprised at how many things that you can do on your own.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Go love on yourself, loving on yourself. Just go love on you. Don't worry about what he is doing. Just love on yourself.
And a lot of times it's just it sounds tiny, but it's not. Loving yourself is the most important thing you can do. It's the healthiest thing you can do. And that, for me, that helped with my self-esteem when I finally realized that I could love myself. And a lot of people don't even know that you get to love on yourself. It's almost like a foreign thought. But for me, it was tremendous. And, doing work that you're doing, that must be so gratifying.
Oh, it is. It is very, very gratifying.
Brilliance. Yeah. Yeah. Well, can you tell for the listener where someone can get a hold of you at? Because I think this is such important work. And maybe if they don't need it, unfortunately, we've all known someone that does.
Right, exactly. The best place to reach me is go to letsbreakthesilence.com. And there you will find all my social media platforms. And also, if they want to book a call with me, there's a book a call button where they can book a compassionate connection call so I can connect with them. I can connect with them and learn more about what their situation is and see if we are a good fit to work together. And also, if they want to be a guest on my podcast, I would be more than happy to serve and have them as a guest on my podcast. But I want to help women, and letsbreakthesilence.com, it features all my programs are there.
Mhm.
My podcast is there. On Facebook, they can reach me at Angeline Constantinou. Very easy. That's the best place actually for them to contact me. And they can contact me through Facebook Messenger. So, and also I have an email. So my email is Angeline@letsbreakthesilence.com. So they
And
can also meet.
I love that title, Let's Break the Silence.
Me too. I came up with that because it's time to break the silence.
Yeah, and that's the first thing that goes in women oftentimes is their voice.
Exactly.
And so I absolutely love that. I love that. Well, I, for one, having been in some situations like that and or knowing people, thank you for your work because it is so, so important. So this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate it. I've learned, I always learn so much from our guests. So I appreciate you being here, and I'm sure we will talk again.
We will talk again soon. Thank you so much, Nicole.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here and be part of the Change Book series. So thank you so much.
I love it. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Nicole Harvick, and this is my co-host,
Rachel Best. And we look forward to seeing you again next time.